Hey guys, a really good afternoon to all of you. We are just waiting for a few more people to join in, and we'll start with the session in another 2 to 3 minutes. So, guys, very good afternoon to all of you. The thing about successful people is that they know how to manage their time really well. So, on this occasion, I would like to cite a quote by Rudyard Kipling. If you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the world and everything in it, which is more, you'll be a man, my son. On this occasion, I would like to add Dvija ma'am onto the. Hey Dvija,
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing fine. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I'm pretty excited to be here today and just
Same here,
interact with all
same
of
here.
you guys. All right.
Same here, same here. It's indeed a privilege to actually be interviewing you. So I'll start off right now. So The World from the Eye of a Child was a book that you had written at the tender age of I think 15 or 16. So
Yeah.
what was your basic thought process, your inspiration, and how did you basically grow throughout the journey?
So I think like a lot of us, I used to read a lot of books when I was a kid. Like I was just like, there's always a group of kids in class who just like sit on the side and they read books all day. I was that kid. So I guess I went to like a literature fest or something where I got to meet all these authors and like get books signed by them and stuff. And something about that experience was pretty inspiring to me. I was 13 when this happened, and something inside me was just like, you know what? I should just try to write like a
Wow.
story of my own. I don't think I intended for it to be published. I was 13. I had no idea how publishing even worked. I wasn't expecting for it to be something. I was just like, you know what? I'm going to take my laptop and then I'm just going to type whatever stories that come in my mind. So that's usually how it started off as. And once I was almost like 90% done with it, my mom ended up seeing it and she was like, you should try to get this published. So she was the one who put that idea in my head. So obviously, I did not start off with me being like, okay, let's try to get a book published at like the age of 13. So when that happened, she was the one who helped me kind of reach out to publishers. I actually got it published by Penguin's sister company, Partridge. So
Yes.
they reached out to me, and it actually I learned a lot from that process. Like being 13, 14, and being in the whole publishing field, learning how all of that works is pretty impressive. And in the way that I learned so much as a kid of just how the real world works when it comes to like people who have jobs, people who reach out to people, and I think that was pretty interesting for me. So that's kind of what it started off as. It's just like I wanted to write, and then I was like, let's see if I can actually get it published. So
Right, right. And do you attribute the success of your book to your mom to a
yeah, I
certain
think she
extent?
definitely pushed me to try to get it published, and she helped me through a lot of the knickknacks of it as well. She was the one who like helped me string all these emails. And the first time I actually sent out my manuscripts to publishers, I got rejected by a bunch of them. So a lot of the times I would get pretty sad about that when they would be like, okay, sorry, we can't publish this or something of that. So whatever excuse that they would give when they don't want to publish it, she was the one who told me that J.K. Rowling at the time, she had this interview where she said that she got rejected, like Harry Potter's manuscript got rejected like 7 to 8 times before it actually got picked up. So if something as successful as Harry Potter can get rejected 7 times, then I can definitely accept being rejected a few times before it actually ends up being accepted. So that was kind of what was inspiring to me at the time, just learning how to face rejection at a pretty early age.
So, do you think such off-the-hand skills, a few people and little things, actually help you from an interview point of view?
Yeah, I think it definitely does. I think the biggest part about interviews, apart from let's say whichever questions they ask you that you need to know the like technical background of, apart from all of that, a really big part of interviews in general is how you can be remembered out of like the crowd of let's say I don't know 20, 30 people they'll be interviewing that day. You have to find out a way that you can make yourself like stand out, where you can be that's the girl who wrote the book, like that's the guy who had a startup or whatever other I think identifier that you have. So having a book was definitely a big identifier for me, because that's something that when people see on my resume, that's usually the first thing they'll ask me about. So I think it's important to figure out like an identifier that you might have in an interview, because when you go in for a tech interview, you know that everyone there has done projects. You know everyone
Right.
there is a part of some club and chapter, and everyone, at least in VIT, everyone has some board position or the other. It doesn't really make you stand out that much when, at least when you're in VIT and trying to get placements. But trying
Yeah.
to figure out something that you know for a fact that, yeah, that no one else is gonna have, I think it definitely helps, because then you become that person. So I think that really helped. Other than that, I think about interviews, you have to figure out a way to grasp the interviewer's attention towards things that you can actually talk about. So if an interview starts off as, hey, here's a question and you answer it, here's another question and you answer it, it can come off as pretty pressurizing for you, because you're like on edge, like what are they gonna ask me next? What if I don't know the answer to that? What if I can't answer it properly? What if I answer it wrong? Whatever. But then if you can figure out a way to, like, I guess, steer the interview in a direction that you know you can answer, that if they ask you about your book or they ask you about your startup, whichever other identifier that you have, if you figure out a way to, I guess, steer the conversation that way, you know that you will be able to grasp it. Then the interview is in your control. You can control where it goes. So I think with a little bit of practice, that is something that really helps me in interviews, is to just like figure out a path I can take it in, so that I am never posed with a question that I don't know about. So it's definitely helps in just steering the interview towards like your favor.
Right, right. So, do you suggest a little bit of maybe creativity in an interview? Does that help actually? Does that help you stand up?
It definitely helps me stand out, because more than creativity, I think it like the best skill that I learned from all that is just how to learn and talk to different kinds of people and just like come up with a rapport with all of them. When you interview, you don't know who the person is, you don't know what kind of person they are, you don't know their interests. But if you can figure out something that piques their interest and you steer the whole conversation that way, with just like the way you talk, and try to make it, that's what I always do in interviews, is try to make it a back and forth thing, but I try to ask them questions and they answer it, instead of it being like them asking me a question and me answering it, because I can get stressed out 3 questions later in a situation like that.
Right,
So I think
right,
it
right.
definitely helps, like, however creatively you can, to make it more like a back and forth conversation, rather than them asking you 100 questions and you trying to answer all of them correctly. Because you might not be able to answer a lot of questions and you don't know what kind of question they'll ask you. And you know for a fact that whatever they're asking you, they're asking the same exact thing to 20 other people. So if you answer it correctly, maybe 10 other people answer it correctly too. So what makes you stand out other than the other 10 people who also answer those 10 questions correctly? So I think it definitely helps to be creative in a way that make it a conversation. Try to put your effort that way. And it takes practice. It takes a couple of like you messing up interviews and like you stammering to then figure out how exactly can I build a rapport with this person, because you've never met them before. You don't know who they are. So I think it definitely helps that way.
Right, right. That I really grew with that question. How was basically your experience working at DRDO? I think it's defense, right?
Yeah, so I actually did an internship, like industrial internship, which I had to do. I did it with DRDO in the solid state physics lab in Delhi. So I was an electronics student. So I had absolutely no interest in electronics, and also I didn't want to do a future in electronics. I knew that I wanted to do something else, but I knew I had to do an industrial internship. I knew what all Sense Office would accept. So I knew that I would have to put myself out of my comfort zone. So for me, I looked at it as I'm going to put myself out of my comfort zone and do something that I have no idea about. And putting myself in a pretty competitive field, like as defense research, was interesting, because I think a lot of life is about learning how to do well in places which are like out of your comfort zone, places that you don't know anything about. So doing internships which are different, which are not really something that you're interested in, helps you learn how to, I guess, learn fast, learn how to, I guess, answer questions when you don't know what to do. And it just, I think, develops you a lot. I think it's important. Everyone does internships in companies or fields that they don't really have interest in. It definitely helps you learn a lot more than just, I think, doing an internship in a field that you care about is. So I think it definitely helped me. And I got to work in a proper government office. I'd never seen how that functions. That was pretty interesting as well. And I had to work under a guy who was a scientist. So he was actually, they have different levels of scientists at DRDO. So he was actually a scientist who was working on missiles and radar. So he actually gave me a lot of information about just how things like that work. So it's important, because feels like mechanical, feels like electrical. A lot of them are pretty heavily math and physics based. So you don't
Yeah.
really understand how these things apply in the real life. Like you're doing formulas, you're doing 10 markers. We've all done FATs and things like that. But it's important to know like how exactly these formulas play out in real life situations where they're actually used. So I think that was pretty interesting for me to see, EC concepts that I had just done like formulas and like numericals in, to see how they actually apply in real life laboratories or real life situations. So that was pretty interesting.
Right. Uh, right. You've been part of several clubs and chapters in VIT. I think you were part of Toastmasters and IEEE also. And do you think being a part of these clubs and chapters actually help you grow on in life?
So I think this is a multifaceted question, in a point that a lot of people start, and even clubs and chapters, they will often advertise themselves, oh, this looks good on your resume, or if
Right.
you take part in this hack, you can like put it on your resume, which I think is important. You can, but in a college like VIT, which is huge and has so many clubs and chapters that like every day you like hear of a new one that you've never heard of, I don't think it really helps you in your resume, because no one has ever asked me, hey, what was it like being in IEEE? Or what was it like being in Toastmasters? Because they see everyone in every college is in some kind of club and chapter. There are very few people who like don't participate in anything. But I think teaches you a lot of skills that like are not exactly things you can put on your resume. So for me, working in multiple clubs and chapters taught me a lot how to manage my time, just with like academics and VIT stuff. Then you're like learning how to go to these different meetings, and it's just trying to find a way to like do everything in the very short amount of time that VIT provided was incredibly helpful. And I think that, and you also learn, I think, how to work with different kinds of people. When you work in clubs and chapters, you'll meet people that you don't exactly gel with. You might not be friends with them outside of the club and chapter. Like they might not be the kind of people that you gel with, but you have to work with them. You have to organize an event with them. You have to, I don't know, be in the same board as them, or you might have to, I guess, interact with people that are not really the kind of people who work the similar way as you do. So it's important to be in these clubs and chapters to learn how to interact with people, learn how to network. And I think one of the biggest things about these clubs and chapters are all these events that they keep organizing. You have all these amazing speakers that come in, right? And you have, when I used to organize hacks and stuff with IEEE, we used to have mentors and judges from like these reputed industries and fields. And I think we should make use of that. And I think advertise that as how much you can just interact with them. I know people who, I guess, just interacted and talked to people who came in as mentors or speakers in these hacks and ended up getting internships from them just by interacting with them. And you can do that if you're a part of that club and chapter. Most people in the audience don't get to have that kind of one-on-one interaction. So that definitely helps to just, I guess, build your network, because so much of life after college is just networking. You're not going to get opportunities easily handed to you. You're not in a kind of environment where you're going to be given that. So it's important to have just the connection. I think LinkedIn is pretty important for things like that. To just, if you meet a speaker and you like what they talk about, connect with them on LinkedIn, like strike up a conversation. And 9 times out of 10, they'll actually enjoy the fact that you cared enough to like then talk to them after their session or after their judgment or mentorship or whatever they provided. So I think these are the things which clubs and chapters provide to you, that you can't really put them on your resume, but I think it definitely helps when you get out in the real world and you're talking to real people in real industries and doing real jobs, whichever field it is, tech or non-tech. So I think it definitely helps in that sense to make use of it, and not look at it as, if I participate in a hack, I can put it on my resume, because everyone's going to do that. So how are you going to make it like work for you?
So life skills, time management, and a few contacts, right?
Yeah,
That
just
is
skills of
what we come
networking.
to.
It
Right.
also taught me how to have like good work ethic, because you have to
Right.
deliver work on time. And again, it's a lot of clubs and chapters are pretty lax about things like that, but if you're serious about the kind of work that you do and you're serious about just things like that, it'll teach you how to work on time, how to like interact with different people. And if you're in the third, fourth year, you might actually also get a chance to be in the leadership position for some of these clubs and chapters. So you get to see, how do I have a team that like I can efficiently run. And no
Right.
matter what you do in life, no matter what kind of job you have, there is probably going to be a point in time where you're going to have people who work under you, and you're going to have a team that you're kind of leading. There's no matter, even if it's tech or it's non-tech, whatever kind of job it is. So it's important to learn those kind of skills. How do you keep a team motivated? How do you make them work for an event that, for example, they might not care about? How do you make sure that the quality of the work is perfect, even though you're not really paying the juniors in your club and chapter to do anything? So how do you motivate them to do this? How do you motivate them to find you sponsorship, get you speakers? I think all those things are incredibly important, and it forces you to learn all of those things if you're serious about it. Otherwise, you can go to the clubs and chapters and have fun. That's also another aspect of it, but you can make the best out of that situation. So that's what I think I recommend.
Right. Got it. So, what is your view about projects versus CGPA versus maybe internships? What is your view on that? Like, which has a greater emphasis, maybe from an interview point of view?
So I've not given a lot of like PAT interviews. I just technically gave one, which I know most people end up giving a lot of them. But that was really not how I ended up. Like I got lucky in the fact that I had one interview and that ended up working out pretty well for me. But I think CGPA is important because at least in VIT, from what all of us have seen, a lot of companies have like upper caps. Okay, you need to be at least 9 point or to be at least a part of this test, or to at least even be a part of, I guess, the whole process of like trying to get an internship or trying to get a job. So I think it's incredibly important that you keep your GPA just above a certain level. Try not to have N grades. I mean, it's important, but I think after a point, it just helps you get to the interview. Because once you get to an interview, once you pass your coding test, once you do all of those things and you're talking to an interviewer, I've never had an interviewer ever like specifically ask me my GPA. And even if people who had like 9.6, 9.7, pretty high GPAs, you know that that's not the focal point of the interview ever. That definitely shows to the interviewer that you're focused and determined. So when I interviewed for Amazon, I was an electronics student. So none of my GPA really mattered to them in the sense of there was probably one subject that I did in EC that mattered to them, that what I do in my job now. But having a good GPA shows that you're focused and you're determined, that you can follow like an institutional structure. That's what corporate workspaces are looking for, right? And it's important for you to be like determined, and the CGPA is the best way for you to kind of show to the interviewer that if I'm a part of, let's say, an organization, I'm dedicated towards it. I'm focused. I'm putting in my time. I have a 9.7, 9.8. So I'm not like failing subjects because I don't care about it. So that's important because corporate people know that like, hey, you might end up doing work that you might not enjoy. Like you might have a week where you're working with a team that you don't really care about or things like that. So it's important for you to show them that I will put in effort, even if it's something that, you know, is not really my cup of tea. No one enjoys giving exams, but it shows that you're determined, you're focused. So I think GPA is important, but I don't think it's the only thing that matters, because once you get to the interview, once they see that, okay, yeah, you're a 9+ person, after that, what else have you done that like other 9 pointers sitting next to you outside the room haven't done? So in that sense, I think projects are important as well. But one thing I've always seen is it's important to build your resume in a way that you can find points that the interviewer can like pick up on really quickly. I've seen a lot of people with resumes who have impressive projects that I probably don't even know like the head and tail of. But the way they'll like put it in the resume or the way they'll place it will be so like weird, because when the interviewer looks at it, if they don't catch that project within the first 3 seconds, they're not going to read your whole resume. No interviewer is going to read like a whole page resume which has so much text in it, which they probably read like the same thing over and over and over. So it's important that if you have something that is big, that you know is big, that you know other people might not have done, to highlight it properly. So for example, when I did my internship with DRDO, it's not something that is special. I've seen DRDO has interns every year in every city, but like highlighting words or highlighting things that the interview might pick up on. So when you highlight internship, DRDO, that they're gonna read internship first. They're gonna be like, okay, she interned. Everyone interns, right? But if you look at it as interned at DRDO, when you highlight it, you put it in bold. So if I participated in a competition with NASA, right, instead of putting in first place at something, they're gonna lose it after first place because they're like, okay, yeah, she got first place at something. But if you put it as winners and then you put NASA in bold and you kind of put it at the top of your resume, I think it definitely helps catch the attention, because an interviewer is going to look at your resume for 3 seconds and they're going to maybe pick one or two focal points from it. So try to make sure whichever project you've done to highlight things that the interviewer is going to catch on. And a lot of the times, and you might have let's say you have a project that you've done which is impressive, but it's in machine learning, and you might end up getting an interviewer who's not comfortable with machine learning. They're not going to ask you anything about that project. They're not,
Right.
because an interviewer is going to ask you stuff that they know a little bit of the background about, and you don't know what kind of interviewer you're getting. What if he's not into machine learning? Your machine learning project might have taken you 2 years. He's never going to ask you about it, which is why if you put it as like, maybe you worked on it with a company or with a big brand or something like, okay, Amazon, Flipkart, things like that, any interviewer is going to know what Amazon, Flipkart, Google is. So if you like highlight those words, they will ask you about it. And then you can steer it however you want it to. And if the interviewer doesn't know what machine learning is, good for you. They're not going to ask you any questions. So I think it's important to have good projects, but it's more important to highlight them. When I went for my interview for Amazon, which is, they're looking for like pretty serious software developers. I had no software development projects on my resume. I had some electronics projects that I had done here and there, like for projects and like J components and stuff, which we all know how serious we are about those. But like the thing I had on my resume were just like big words that everyone knows. So when you say like book, or when you say NASA, when you say Amazon, when you say things like that, an interview is gonna pick up on it no matter what, right? So I got to like clear an interview with like barely any like zero software related things on my resume. So I think it's important to just like frame your resume correctly. So what helps is go to someone who's not in the tech field. Go to your mom, go to your, I don't know, dad, go to anybody who's not exactly, an interviewer doesn't, and tell them to read your resume and tell them what's the first two things that you looked at. Like, give them 5 seconds. What's the first thing that came to your mind? What did you see first? And if they say, oh, I saw that you did your EC from electronics and this is a GPA, you know that you're like building your resume wrong. So it helps to have your resume be reviewed by someone who's not really into tech and tell them what's the first three things you picked up. And try to make like the biggest achievements you have, the biggest identifiers you have, highlight them in a way that anyone, even if they're not in the field, can pick those things out and like are interested in it. So I think all these things are pretty important. So when you're doing projects, highlight them. It doesn't matter to have like 20 projects, have 2 projects which are better than other people's 20 projects, and like highlight them in a way that you know for a fact the interviewer is going to ask you something about it. And you have your answers prepared because you did all of that stuff. And I guess with internships, it's a pretty similar thing. It's not about doing internships, but where you did your internship, what did you do there. So again, doing 6 internships in a company that, or like multiple companies that like are not very well known and you don't even highlight it, doesn't matter. You've done 6 internships. Or like one person who's interned at Google, they're going to be picked up like faster. They're going to ask them, hey, what did you do at Google? Because everyone wants to know about those things and everyone knows what Google is. So if you have like big names, big companies, it's just about selling yourself. Like, how can you market yourself? Like, you interned at, or maybe you interned at a startup that you founded. That's better than like interning at, let's say, a mid-tier B company or something like that. So it's important to frame your resume and market yourself. But again, GPA is also important. You don't want to have like an N grade because then it shows that like, maybe you weren't focused that one semester and you messed up this one exam and like things like that. But again, GPA is not the only thing which matters.
Right. Just basically having a few talking points in your resume, right? That highlight information. So your resume should be able to speak for you in a way of sorts, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's
Okay.
definitely important to have that. It's, as I said before, like you need to learn, or like not you, just in general, everyone needs to learn how to, I guess, like steer the interview in a direction that you're comfortable with, where you can anticipate what the next question might be. And the only way you can do that is if you make your resume in a way that they don't care about the 10 fixed questions they have. They're like, oh my god, like I don't care about any of that. Tell me about this. Tell me about your project you did with Google. Tell me about you did this and this. So I think that will make you stand out. So that's probably it. You have to be remembered, and you have to figure out a way to steer the conversation in a way that you're comfortable with the direction it's heading. So you're not put in a spot where you're given a question, you're like, well, I don't know what this is. I haven't studied this, because then it makes you obviously look bad.
Right. Got it. That was a lot. So, in your opinion, what are the certain make or break points in an interview? Maybe you're sitting in the interview hall, and what are the things that basically make your case and break your case while you're giving the interview?
So if you Google stuff like that, you get a lot of tips, right? There are some like pretty basic tips, like make sure your shirt is ironed, your nails are cut, things like that, which I think everyone takes care of. Things like that, like make sure you look fine. But there are a few like other things you can do that like most people don't, so that makes you obviously stand out. So I think the biggest tip that I have is like when you walk into the room. Now, when people say we walk into an interview, they usually envision you walking into the room with all the panelists sitting in front of you, right? But when I say walk into an interview, I mean walking into like the room where all the other kids are sitting as well. Because yeah, you don't have to talk to them. They don't matter to you in a sense that, okay, they're not going to be interacting with you. But one of the biggest things you can do is, I don't know the right way to say this, but you can make yourself in a way like look so much so confident and just like I deserve to be here, I need to be here, that like it will kind of tamper with their confidence a little bit. And yeah, maybe it's not the the thing that like is highlighted the most, but when you walk into an interview, like you'll always see one person walks in so confident, they're like, yeah, this is an interview, like I already got this, and they walk in, they sit down, they're not nervous, and you will get intimidated by them. They're like, why is this person so confident, why does this person seem so in control? You can be that person, or you can at least pretend to be that person. And that helps. Another tip that I have with stuff like this is when you walk into an interview room and you sit down, wherever you have to wait, and if everyone's just like sitting there judging each other, everyone's like shaking their leg because everyone is so nervous and they're waiting for their chance to come, try to be that person who like strikes up a conversation with the people next to you. So when you do that, it will help you get over your nerves, because you're like talking to people, your brain is kind of distracted from like the 30-40 minutes of waiting you might have to do. But then it also makes the other people feel like, okay, she's so confident and in control, and makes them feel a little bit worse about themselves, which I don't know if that's the right way to like put it, but it helps your case. You're here to win, right? That's what you're here to get the job. You don't know if the person next to you might know more than you in tech. He might be so much better than you at like the things that you're like talking about. But when you go into that interview and you make yourself look like I deserve to be here, start up a conversation with them, and like when you're in the interview, bring it up. Be like, so me and the guy sitting next to me, insert name here, we're talking about this. Yeah, it makes the interview be like, yeah, she was sitting outside, she was networking, she was talking to people, which like they care about. Most people don't do that. So if you do end up striking a conversation, bring it up in the interview somehow. If they ask you a question about machine learning, you answer the question correctly, then be like, yeah, I think this is interesting. Me and the guy sitting next to me, XYZ, we were talking about a similar thing. So that kind of shows to the interviewer, okay, you know, she was not just sitting there and just like looking through her file, she was talking to people. So that helps definitely. And again, making a good first impression, walk in with like a beautiful handshake. You like, there are so many videos on YouTube like how to give a perfect handshake, and it might seem
Yeah.
like, okay, this is lame, no one cares about a handshake, but it's important because like a good handshake is remembered no matter how irrelevant you think it is for the next like 50-60 minutes of the interview. So I think it's definitely important to do that. And another tip that I have is, so at the end of each interview, no matter what kind of interview it is, it might be a tech interview, might be a for a college that you're applying to, anything, they'll always ask you, hey, do you have any questions for us? It's so important for you to like prepare 2 or 3 questions that like you can just like bring up, because it shows that like you're not just sitting at 20 company interviews and just like trying to get one of them to succeed. You care about this company. Maybe you don't. Maybe you prepared these like 10 minutes before, like in the car, but it shows to them that you care. And there are some like pretty basic like stock questions you can ask them if you're applying for a job. You know, the person that is interviewing you is someone who's like held that position, does a similar job. You can ask them, hey, what is a day in your life like? Or like, hey, what is a job in a day? Like, what do you do all day? Or like stuff like that. When I got to interview, I was in an interview, I remember, with the CTO of Wipro. And he's a CTO. There's no way I'm getting to like a CTO level position like anytime soon. So what kind of question would I could have asked them? So I had to ask them like, okay, what's a day in your life like? What kind of day do you have? Like, how much do you think you interact with people as a CTO and like do more managerial side of things? How much do you think you do more like tech stuff? And like, it's important because like he was talking about his life. And like a psychological hack that you have is everyone loves people who gets them to talk about themselves. People love talking about themselves. Like, I'm talking about myself here, and I like this because like everyone does. So an interviewer, if you somehow get them to talk about their life, their job, their projects, whatever they're working on, whatever they're comfortable with, they're gonna remember you because they'll be like, okay, yeah, this is the question, this is the girl who asked me about my job, and then I answered and stuff like that. So try to get your interviewer to talk to you about them as well, in whichever way you can. So that definitely helps.
Right, right. It shows basically your investment towards the company, right? That you're actually invested in being a part of the company, right?
Yeah, when you ask them, hey, what is a day in your life like? It like kind of shows them, okay, she's interested in being a part of this company. That's why she wants to know what a day in the life would be like, and like things like that. It definitely helps. And if you do basic googling, I think it's you can come up with 5 to 6. No one asks you 5 to 6, but you can come with like 2 to 3 pretty solid questions that you can ask them. I think it's a good like area of the interview that most people skim over because they're like, okay, this is done, I'm over, I can leave now. But like that's the last impression you're gonna leave is the question that you ask them. So I think most people gloss over it. They're like, okay, I have no questions because the like interview is done, I can leave now. But I think it's important to just like ask them something. There are some stock questions you can ask them. You can ask them specific questions. You can Google it, whatever, based on the company and stuff. So that's helpful, I think.
Right, right. So, very important thing about interview, as you just said, is that a lot of people face a lot of stress going into the interview. So, assume you are on the third round of a really great company, of some great company that you are basically applying for. So, a day before that, what is your mindset? How do you exactly prepare? Do you like totally zone out of it, or do you like constantly keep on, preparing and make sure keywords are in your mind?
So I think when you ask people about this or you try to like look at tutorials on Google or stuff, they tell you, hey, one day before the interview, just zone out and chill out, don't worry about it. That's impossible to do, personally speaking, for me. And like I think for most of us, like a day before the interview is when we're doing most of our work because we're like, okay, what else can I ask them? Stuff like that. But another thing you can do is in a lot of cases, you might have an idea of who your interviewer might be. You might have their name, you might have their position. Sometimes, I think 90% of the time, they'll give you some kind of an idea about who it is. If they give you an actual person, you can Google them, stalk them, find out their LinkedIn, Because like a LinkedIn is where they'll put, you can see what kind of posts they like. So when I had to interview with someone, I was interviewing with this person. I don't exactly remember for what it was, but when I got to hear the name of the person and I Googled them on LinkedIn, I found out that they had like a dad who was in the army. And I was like, yeah, that's a point I can pick up. Because then if they put it on their LinkedIn, they put some post about their dad being in the army. And I was like, this is something that they're passionate about. This is something that they care about. And you can see what kind of projects you worked on. So you can bring it up in conversation. If you're interviewing with someone who's worked on a project with deep learning. I'm just giving an example off the bat. And you know the project, you know a little bit of the specifics of it because you saw it on LinkedIn. You can be like, once they ask you a question about deep learning, you can like put in like, so how does it think this specific topic helped you when you were working on this project? So it shows them like, okay, yeah, they know who they are and things like that. So whenever you do Google it, figure out a way to striking it in conversation. They're not going to ask you directly, hey, what do you learn about me? But you can figure out a way to then just like, push it in the conversation somehow where like it's not obvious, but it's kind of subtle. And I think it definitely helps to do that. It makes you stand out. And again, as I said, everybody loves talking about themselves. Even if it's an interviewer, they will like you so much more if you can get them to just talk about themselves. I've had interviews where I didn't talk as much as the interviewer did, and I ended up getting selected for whatever it was because they were like, yeah, she's the person who like subconsciously made me talk about myself, and then they'll subconsciously like you, and that definitely helps. Like you're there to figure out a way to get in, and interviews, even if they're tech interviews, yes, they're about tech, yes, they're about the questions that you're asked and things like that, but it's also so much more about just like you as a person. And I think people tend to forget that when they go for tech interviews, they're like, okay, they just care about my tech skills, and they do care, but you can, if you don't think that like you have tech skills that are on par, and again, you have no idea the other people taking the interview or other people also interviewing with you have no idea how skilled they are. So sometimes you can't just rely on your own tech skills. You might not know the person sitting next to you is like so much better than you. What are you going to do then? So having these like interpersonal like soft skills definitely helps you stand out because it'll cover up for whatever skill that you might not have, or it might cover up for anything else that you might lack in tech wise. Because anyone can learn tech. It's just like you Google it, there are tutorials and things like that, but you can't learn things like this. You can't learn these communication skills and things like that. Yeah, so I think it's important.
So, assume like you're now in the interview, and any particular gestures or behavior that you portray inside the interview hall that actually gives you a one up maybe over the rest of all the people.
Yeah, I think it helps because you can do certain things. Like as I said, you walk into the room, like the way you walk into the room helps. Like don't slouch, don't just like walk in nervously, like fumbling with whatever stuff you have. We tend to do that because we're so nervous and we're so like jittery. But it helps to when you walk into the room. What I always do is like right before I walk in, I tell myself, "You already got this job. You got this. Now you're just going there for fun. You're already selected," and it kind of tricks your brain into thinking, yeah, everything is chill because like it's about just calming yourself down, getting over the nerves. So much of these interviews are like stress interviews because the main point is to like try to find your stress breaking point. And if you can just like convince your brain, be like, yeah, I already got this job, I already got this internship, I'm good, I'm just going there to just talk to them for fun. It kind of helps you like ease out a little bit. And I think that when it comes to gestures, it helps coming across as someone who's confident and eager to learn. And another thing that I want to like point out is a lot of the times they'll ask you questions and you might not know how to answer them. Sometimes they'll ask you a question, you have no idea what this topic is, you haven't studied it, you're not sure what to say. Most people will end up like stuttering a little bit. Most people will try to like guess an answer based on whatever they know, and there's a good chance that your guess is correct, but there's also a very good chance that your guess is wrong. And what do you do in like cases like this is when I interviewed for Amazon, they asked me a question for like that was I think a DBMS question, which I had never studied DBMS in my life because I was an electronics student. Now instead of trying to come up with some kind of bullshit explanation of what this topic is or what this question is, I straight up was pretty confident. I told them, hey, being an electronics student, I haven't learned this, but I'm pretty excited and eager to learn. So if you could inform me what this is about, that would help. So that comes off as, okay, they're eager to learn. And a friend of mine told me, I think when I was like maybe in my second year, that if you don't know the answer to something, it's best to tell them that you don't know rather than try to guess and get it wrong, because that makes you look worse. So what always helps to me is if I don't know the answer to something, I'll be the first one to be like, I'm not quite aware of this, I'm not quite sure of the answer, do you think you could enlighten me? And then get them to tell you what the right answer is. Don't just leave it at that. Tell them to be like, I would like it if you could tell me what this XYZ topic means. And that helps because again, they're talking about themselves, which always helps. So that gets that, whole thing cleared out. But it also shows that like, you're not just gonna say an answer that you're not sure about. So I think it's important to do that. And most people tend to just like guess, which which works sometimes, but I think it's important to not take that risk when you're guessing. So. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're back.
Yeah. Do you suggest basically that we have, we practice a few gestures or things before we go for the interview, or just let it happen on the day of the interview? Just go with the flow.
I think going with the flow helps because like every interview is different. But I think what people can practice beforehand is how to like properly like steer the conversation to the way that you're like comfortable with, and try to like do mock interviews with like your friends or like people that you don't know. I've done mock interviews with like random cousins and stuff that I don't know anything about their life, just to see what kind of topics pique their interest, because it's important for you to know when you go into an interview what kind of person is the interviewer, what kind of questions do they like, how do they like questions, like what do they do, do they like nod their head, do they like shake their head. So it's important to do mock interviews to just like figure out a way to like calm your nerves, like steer the conversation, make it conversational. I think the biggest hurdle that I felt was jumping from back and forth questions and answers to make it into a conversation. It sounds easy, but it takes practice. So I think having just like a few interviews, that even it's okay if you mess them up. So it's important to just do some practice interviews, do them with your friends. If you have like, if you have a parent who works in a company, ask them if it's okay to get them just to get like a coworker or something that they work with to just like give you like a mock interview. So just for fun. I don't know how exactly it works, like what kind of connections other people might have, but I've done stuff like that where I've just asked my dad to be like, hey, could I just like interview with this person at your work? I just want to like do a mock interview. I'll give them my resume. I'll tell them to give me 15 minutes. I just want to see if I'm able to like steer the conversation and like pique their interest. So that's important. I think it's important to practice. I don't think you should go to an interview just like let it go with the flow. It helps, but it's help. You have one chance at an interview. You have one chance at like making a first impression. So leaving it like kind of like on the flow doesn't exactly work out. I think it's important to practice. And the best thing that you can do is like figure out a way to get over your nerves, because like our nerves is what usually will get us down. Because we can sit and talk about things that interest us, but when you're in an interview with a group of like 10 to 15 people, you don't know what to do. You're like in a panel, you don't know anything, and it can get pretty stressful. And another thing people can do, I think, after the interview is if you know their names, which is important when they're introducing themselves, to like register their names. If it's multiple people, register all of their names. If it's a couple of people, it's easier. And then when you're answering questions, try to answer that, by their name, which always helps. People love hearing their own name. It's also a psychological trick that I learned. So if you're like being like, hey, XYZ, it helps because then everyone ears perk up when they hear their own name. They're kind of like more interested in it. So it helps to then answer questions with their name. But again, it can be different. You might have to call them sir, you might have to call them Mr. with their surname. And once you're
Right.
done with the interview and you go home, it's the end of the day. Try reaching out to them on LinkedIn or an email, whichever software you have available with you, and tell them like a little thank you note. Be like, thank you for like like giving me a bit of your time or whatever. You can Google stuff like that, and just like thank them for like just like giving away 20-30 minutes of their time to interview you. And I think again that'll make you stand out. Might not everyone might not have sent them an email that day, and you might be the one who's like, hey, thanks. That makes you stand out. Like even 6 hours after the interview, that's how you're gonna be in their head. And that's all you need to do. You need to just be in their head, whichever way you can.
They need to be recollecting you. You should be the take back value when
Mm-hmm.
you go back home. You should be the person whom they are thinking of at every point. Right. You wrote a you have this podcast of yours, One Day at a Time, I think. And could you just tell us a little bit about it? How has the experience been with it?
Yeah, so I started a podcast as I did because it was something that I loved. I love listening to podcasts. I was like more of a podcast, less of a listening to music person. So I used to listen to a lot of podcasts. And one day I decided, you know what, I'm just gonna make my own. I didn't tell anybody about it for a couple of months. I just like kept it completely secret, and I got like a few people who listened, which kind of gave me a bit of confidence that yeah, maybe this is good enough. Maybe this is just not a fun side hobby. Maybe this is something that I can tell people about. But again, I think it's important for people to have like a hobby or just something that they do apart from college or school or job, whatever they do, that is solely for themselves. That they do it solely because it makes them happy. And I've never looked at my podcast as, oh, maybe I want to see how many more listens I can get. I want to grow my audience. I want to get like 1,000 people listening, then 10,000 people listening. A lot of people who started podcasts now, you can tell that that's where their goal is at. They're like, hey, please listen to my podcast. Please share it. For me, it's always been like, I'm just doing it for myself. If people organically find me, they find me. If they don't find me, I'm fine. And I think I was given an advice by I'm mentioning this over and over because it was a pretty great interview for me when I got to meet the CTO of Wipro, right? He was the one who was like, I think the world needs more creative pursuits, which people do just because they want to do it and not because they're earning money from it, not because it's making them famous. And I think that's when most people are their most truthful, they're their most honest. And it definitely, I think the world needs more of that. So just like doing things for yourself, not doing it to put it on your resume, not doing it to, I don't know, just like get a job, not doing it to like be like, oh yeah, I need this one more thing in my resume. I just need something to do with sports. So I'm just gonna start a sport. Do it for yourself. Do it for, just like to get your brain off of things and just. I think the world needs that, as I said before. So again, it's not something I've always tried to sell to people. If you want to listen to my podcast, you're interested in it, give it a shot. Like to everyone listening. But if not, then no hard feelings. I'm just doing it for the fun of it.
That you're passionate about is basically what you're trying to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Having your own nook where you do something that you really like and you're passionate about. That's something that we all should cultivate.
Yeah, because a lot of you guys might want to do tech jobs and you're interested in tech because you love coding, you love machine learning, whatever it might be. But once you start doing a job, once it starts becoming something that you get a paycheck out of, it will slightly lose its fun for you because then it'll be deadlines and meetings and things like that. So it's important to then maybe do side projects if you're interested in tech, do side projects completely unrelated to just like the job you're doing or the internship you're doing. So it'll keep your interest alive in whichever passion that you have. So for me, podcasting was just like me keeping my interest alive in something. And if you're someone who doesn't have like a creative pursuit of sorts, if you just like doing tech, just like doing coding, try to do it on your side apart from whatever job, whatever placement prep, whatever other things you're doing, just for yourself. So it'll help you just like learn, and it definitely helps in the future as well.
Wow, that was a huge amount of download today. So I'll now be opening the forum out for questions, and
Okay.
based on that, I'll select the questions and I'll ask you the questions. Is that good?
Okay, great. Yeah.
Give me like a minute with the questions start coming in. And
I think someone mentioned that exactly like do things for yourself, which I think is very important. A lot of these like tech skills, like jobs, interview placements, they don't ever tell you to just like take some time out for yourself. Whatever helps you de-stress. So
right. So I've noticed actually a lot of people actually end up lifting projects from GitHub and stuff. So which actually helps you in the project part of the component of the course. However, during interviews, people are not exactly able to talk about it because they haven't done it themselves, right? So,
yeah, I think it's important that when you're putting up a resume, just like put up stuff that you know that if they pick up any point from your resume, if they pick up any word, you should be 100% confident in it. So when you're making a resume, it's important, or like I think it's even more beneficial to have a smaller resume that you, or like not that much stuff in it, that you are confident about every single topic on there, than to put in random GitHub projects that when they ask you about it, you're going to be completely blanked out. But again, I've never had people ask me questions about my project. I had never used GitHub before I started interning at Amazon. Like, I'm going to be honest with you, my first day at Amazon, when nothing, like, no one ever does anything on the first day, it was just orientation, introduction to things like that. That was when I learned what CD and LS were. So, most people, like, probably already know stuff like that. But for me, it was like everything was pretty new.
so I think Sachin has asked. I think Kaiser here has asked, how did you learn coding, especially from the reason being you were from EC. So how did you develop your coding skills?
So I'm gonna be pretty honest here. I didn't really, again, I wasn't really planning to really sit for placements. My whole idea was I'm gonna do an MBA because I didn't want to do EC that bad. But I think for coding, I had like the very basic knowledge that like I learned in my first year because we do these like mandatory Java, Python courses, and even soft skills. I think in my fourth year and third year, soft skills had Java in it. So I think that's all the information that I had. I didn't know a lot of fancy stuff. I didn't know a lot of like data structures and things like that. But I think you can do a lot in coding with just the basic info. I think it's more about like the logic of things than about like the syntax and things like that, which you can always learn. But for me, I've seen that just HackerRank and things like that help. And I think doing it helps more than just reading about it or learning. So I've seen a lot of people, I think, even tell me that it's just like learning from like HackerRank or other Hacker Earth. I think a bunch of these like have good like beginner courses. So it's important to do things like that. But it also helps to, I guess, just like build up on your logic on things like that. Because a lot of times in interviews, I think for my Amazon interview, they just asked me to like write the algorithm for things. They didn't expect me to write syntax. They were like, just write the algorithm. So I think for cases like this, having just like good logic helps. And there is like websites like Geeks for Geeks, which give you like sample questions, like sample Amazon coding questions, sample Google coding questions. So like try to do those because that's very similar to the kind of questions you might be asked.
So there should be a greater emphasis towards the algorithm instead of actually the code itself.
Yeah, I think people give importance to like learning all this syntax, but you can learn syntax whenever. You can Google syntax. Like I still Google syntax when I do my job. Sometimes when I don't know how to do things, but having like a good logic, that is something that you can't learn in a day. That's something you can't Google. Like problem solving, things like that. So that definitely helps. So focus less on learning syntax for everything, making sure you know how everything works, but like more on just learning how to solve a question and how to go about a coding question which you don't know the head and tail of and things like that. And sometimes in coding tests you can hard code it a little bit. No one's reading through that. So I've done a little bit of jugaad. So you can learn things like that as well.
Right. Rohan, I am Singh has asked, basically, how could you develop and improve your professional communication skills? So how can you practice your communication skills so that you're best on your interview day?
I think communication skills is something that comes with practice. I was in Toastmasters, so every once in a while I was forced to go up on stage and talk. So, however, you can like practice putting yourself in these like uncomfortable stage positions. That definitely helps. If you're like in clubs and chapels, I know with like Corona being a thing now, a lot of us are just like at home. But if you're just doing like a Zoom meeting, try to be the person who takes charge. Try to be the person. There's always one person driving a meeting. Try to be that person. Try to organize it. And I think communication skills come with practice. And the biggest thing is getting over the stage fright of it. And because we can talk when we're by ourselves completely fine, but when we're like on stage, when in front of people, we end up stuttering. We end up like losing our like focus on things. That usually will go away with practice. And try to do random if you can post corona. Just do random like stage things. Like if you have a club or an event happening, then be like, okay, can I just like anchor for it, or can I just like introduce a speaker for it? Practice well for it. Don't mess it up. You might offend the speaker, but just like you have to get over stage fear. The only way to do that is to just do it a bunch of times. Like
I
I've
think
messed
even
up on stage, so
yeah, even in Toastmasters we had that thing called table topics, and
yeah.
going on stage and actually giving a table topic, something that you've never heard about before. I think that itself was really challenging. So
I used
I
to
think
be
something,
terrified of that. Yeah.
yeah. So I
But like
think
you give
that's
a
something.
couple of table topics and then you're like, yeah, now I can do any table topic. So
Right, 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 right. Cool. So I think what we all can learn is we all can basically take random topics for ourselves and practice basically talking about it. Assume that we are talking in front of the audience or in front of a mirror, and maybe we all can actually start practicing in that way.
what helps now that we're all at home is if you just want to practice, I think there are a lot of websites where you can get random extempore topics. They like shuffle random topics and give you. Try to like put up
Right.
your camera, phone camera, whatever it is, put it here, and if you're by yourself, record yourself like 2 minutes talking about the topic and then rehear how you like rewatch that video, and you'll see how you're stuttering, you'll see your body language, you'll see like if your shoulders droop or if your eye contact is like like messing up, you're looking down. So I think when we're by ourselves during this whole like COVID period, you can do things like that. You can find a random topic, record yourself, and tell yourself like, go speak about it. And that definitely helps when you record yourself and then rehear it. We can do that once with this whole corona thing. That's, I think, a good workaround to just like going in public.
Right. So, how do you, Diksha has asked, how do you have that much hold on your English? I mean, have you joined any courses or this much speed in your speaking came to you naturally? What's your advice so that we can also have that fluency? So,
I think
basically,
uh, I
please
think a
carry.
lot of this just like comes from being like a kid who used to read a lot of books, and just like I think reading and just reading good literature is important. I know a lot of people might not be people who are into books, but if you want to get like good control of just like the language and you want to know how to be fluent in it and how to be dynamic with it, it's important to read pretty regularly. And if you don't want to read fiction or non-fiction, I think reading good newspapers helps. Read the New York Times, read Economic Times, read like good newspapers with like good. There's a New Yorker, you can find free New Yorker articles. Like there are a lot of like literature pieces that are not books, which books are time consuming to read. I understand no one has time for that. But when I was preparing for MBA or like for GRE and things, I needed to like brush up my English. So I used to like have this thing where I would try to read a couple of like articles every day and try to pick
Yeah.
like New Yorker articles or like articles which I know are like good when it comes to the language, not random articles that like are published every day, articles that people spend time on. That definitely helps. And again, I think it just comes with practice and comes with reading.
You have a keen interest in literature. So, have you ever basically thought of pursuing a career in literature, maybe, or even as a part-time, maybe write more books or poetry or sorts?
So for me, being like someone who is like pushed into like the actual literature world, just like with publishing, editing, all of that stuff at 13, I think I realized like pretty early on that like making your passion your like job, which gets you money, will make you lose out on like your passion. It kind of makes it not fun anymore. So, which is why I was always pretty like sure about the fact that like, hey, I will do literature on the side. I'll make podcasts. Maybe I'll write books. Maybe I'll write poetry. But I knew that like the job that I want to do, like 9 to 5, which is going to be the thing that earns me my money, like is my career. I wanted it to be something completely separate, which I know a lot of people are able to do that. They're able to make their passion into their jobs, which is good for them. But I didn't want to lose out for it. I didn't want to lose out the fun for it. For me, writing became less fun if I had to do it on a deadline. So I did a lot of like uh, freelancing, like writing, copywriting internships, and that made me realize soon enough that I didn't want to do writing as a job. So if you're able to do that, good for you. But try not to lose your interest in whichever thing you're passionate about, because I think that's just all I have to say.
Right. I think this will be our last question. So Abhishek Kushwaha, tech friend, he has written, what else does a job interview look out for apart from just tech skills that I could look out for to have better chances of a good job? So I think the summary of the interview itself today will be that, right? So
So,
any things you
apart
can,
from tech stuff, which tech stuff is incredibly important, but most companies know that anyone who's like coming in, like for me, I'm going to give my example. If anyone's coming into like my team as a software developer or whichever thing it is, a lot of the time when you start jobs, you will have to learn new things. Like no one starts a job and knows everything there is to know about the job. No one goes in and being like, oh yeah, now I don't ever need to Google anything because like I know everything. With I think a lot with like tech fields, you still have to keep learning. I know senior developers who still have to Google things and learn things every day. So that's a pretty regular thing to like not know things. But I think it's important to realize to come across as someone who's confident, someone who wants to be there, someone who cares about your company, because companies want someone who will put in their effort for the company, who's not just like applying for 20 companies because oh these are the best 20 companies which pay you the most money. Like someone who you want to be there, you're eager to learn. If you don't know something, you're like, hey, I'm willing to learn this. I'm willing for you to educate me on this. Someone who can work well with teams, which is why the whole trick of talking to someone next to you and like try to slide that into conversation shows that hey, you work well with teams. You can talk to people. You can lead meetings, things like that. So I think those are the things which a company is looking for. They're looking for people who will learn, put in the effort, put in the work, who are focused.
so the learning process constantly needs to be on, right? Need to
Mm-hmm.
constantly keep learning, right?
Yeah, like take initiative for things and like show them that like you have like interest in whatever things that the company is working on. If you want to work in a company, you can Google on some ongoing projects that they have or ongoing skills that they're trying to develop and ask them a question about that, because it shows that oh you're interested in whatever the company has to do in the future. So even with like companies like Amazon, you can Google things that they're currently working on. A lot of it is public knowledge. You can read up about it and talk to them about it, because then other people will talk about the regular Amazon things that everyone knows about. They talk about AWS, Alexa, things like that. But you might know something that they're currently working on. A lot of companies have stuff like this as public knowledge. You just might have to Google it a little bit. But that definitely helps, showing them that you care about the company. At the end of the day, they know that they can take a software developer and they can teach them Java. They can teach them whatever they want to teach them, but they can't teach them to care for the company. They can't teach them to want to put in the effort and be like focused and diligent. So that's all I have to say.
Ruja, we are all very thankful. I, Shaunak Bhattacharya, on behalf of Skillship, especially, we are all very thankful for the fact that you spent so much of time for us and gave us so many insights on the entire process. Anybody, if they have any doubt, they can definitely give us a feedback and tell us what they feel about it. And I'm really grateful to you, Ruja. Thanks a lot. And
Thanks
this
for
was
inviting me for this.
right, right, cool. This was episode 2 of Tech Talks. Uh, Please do follow us, and we look forward to coming up with more such ideas. Thank you, Ruja.
Stay safe, everyone.
Okay.